Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for Genscape's webinar, The Technology and Analysis Behind Our Cushing Storage and St. James Supply Measurements. If you have questions during today's broadcast, please use the questions box in the panel on the right side of your screen, and we'll take questions and answers at the end of the session. Now I'm going to turn it over to Brian Bush, our Director of Oil Market and Business Development here at Genscape.
Thank you, Molly, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining us here today. Just some quick introductions, and then we'll get right into our presentation for today. As Molly said, my name is Brian Bush. I've worked in and around the petroleum industry for well over 20 years, and based on the registration list, I think that there's a lot of friends out there listening today. Joining me is Will Robinson. Well, Will is our senior storage analyst in the Cushing area, and Will's going to go into some detail on we've received a lot of questions over the last couple of months about our storage information, why it doesn't always match up with the EIA report. So we thought it would be a good idea to share with you some of the details of how we measure inventories we report and what distinguishes our information from any other source. Today, we're hoping to identify what distinguishes us from every place else, and then Will is going to talk about the details of how we calculate the inventory levels that we report and how we go through that. Then we're going to compare the Genscape numbers to the EIA numbers. We're going to actually look at both monthly and weekly information and identify any differences and why we think they might be there. Then we're going to go beyond just the Cushing, and we're going to look at some of the other storage intelligence that Genscape provides. Completing that picture, we're going to talk about the total supply chain and what we provide that creates the complete picture that affects the market. And finally, we're going to go into the new St. James report and identify and show you what we're capturing, what we're reporting, and what it means. The most important thing, the most unique difference between the Genscape data and what you receive from the EIA later is that we measure inventories every single time. Everyone else we know of surveys. They ask the operators, how much inventory do you think you have on this date? We take an actual measurement every single time, and we do it exactly the same way. We're very consistent. We fly at the same time each day, so that our week-over-week numbers are accurate comparisons. We also have proprietary technology that we use, both in our monitoring technology as well as software and algorithmics that allow us to create accurate measurements based on the data that we're able to receive from the field. We also provide the information to you faster and with greater frequency. The Friday information on Cushing Storage is delivered to you on Monday. You have to wait until Wednesday for the EIA report. And then by Thursday, the next day, we're already giving you a midweek report. The midweek information that we provide, done with exactly the same methodology as what we do for the Friday ending information. So even those two numbers are a good comparison. Lastly, we provide much greater granularity in our data than anyone else. By going out and using our data download tool, you can pull historical information all the way down to the individual tank levels. So by providing real measurements consistently delivering it faster, and giving you greater granularity, we believe we're providing more valuable information to you than you can get from any place else related to storage. So I'm now going to turn this over to Will, and Will's going to take you through a day in the life of a Genscape analyst and actually show you how we measure and why our measurements are accurate.
Okay, thank you very much, Brian. I'd like to say hello and thank you for listening in today as well. So as Brian said earlier, my name is Will Robinson, and I'm an analyst with Genscape focusing on our North American crude storage products. I'll be talking today about the process we go through to provide our customers with measurements of crude inventories across all of our monitored North American fields. So first, while it's important to note that we're going to be primarily focusing on Cushing and St. James in this presentation, I'd like to say that our methodology is the same across all of our fields. So you can pretty much apply this methodology across the board, so you're getting an accurate picture of how we're getting inventories at all of our fields here. The picture on this slide that you're looking at here is actually the Cushing South terminal. So moving on to the next slide. So the first step in building one of our storage reports is to do a massive amount of in-depth research on the storage field. So that we do that by analyzing government records like permits and maps, aerial and satellite imagery. You're looking at some satellite imagery of Cushing here, as well as company filings and many, many other sources. We also do on-the-ground or in-the-air research to supplement that collected information. So once we get an accurate picture of every tank in a storage field, we build a really detailed database of tank-by-tank information. We then maintain this detailed database with tank information such as operator name, product type, so that could be crude or refined products, tank status, which could be operational, maintenance, under construction. We'll talk a little bit about that later. As well as what type of tank it is. There's floating and fixed roof tanks, which we'll also talk about later. So we build this database and with an incredibly detailed tank information that's available to our customers. And so what you're looking at here is actually a satellite map of the Cushing South terminal, and all of these symbols represent monitored storage tanks plotted across the facility. So let's move on to the next slide. So the next step after doing our facility research and building up our database of tanks is to gather the data. And so we do this by flying the fields and taking images and videos of every single tank. So we fly Cushing twice a week, once to coincide with the Cushing Storage Report by the EIA, which is what Brian mentioned previously, and a second time on Tuesdays or around there to provide an interim midweek look at storage. We also do an end-of-month flight to coincide with the monthly EIA number as closely as possible. And so you'll see some of those matchups later in the presentation. So consistency is the focus of our pilots when they're flying. They attempt to fly at the same time every week, and that's to give an accurate week-over-week picture of storage. We also try to fly at the same elevation and using the same exact flight path. Occasionally, weather conditions won't allow us to fly the exact time we'd like, and in that case, we fly as close as possible to our typical measurement time. Okay, moving on here to how we measure each tank. So the next step after we do our detailed facility research, we have all the tank information, we gather all of our data using our flights, is to measure the tanks. So this is what Genscape really specializes in. We do tank-by-tank measurements for every single flight. And so that means we review and measure around 900 crude tanks in North America, and that's at least once a week. Some of those we measure twice a week. Those tanks represent close to 200 million barrels of storage capacity. So there are two important types of tanks. One is floating and the other is fixed. Like the name states, the roof floats on a floating roof tank, meaning the roof level will change with the oil level. You can actually see it move up and down. And a fixed roof tank has a stationary roof, so the oil level is not visible to the naked eye. So we measure floating roof tanks in the visual spectrum, while we use infrared images to measure fixed roof tanks. And we use proprietary software to measure both types of tanks. So the top set of visual images you can see on this slide show the same floating roof tank on two separate days. The tank has a total capacity of 50,000 barrels, and the image on the left shows it at 78% full, while the image on the right shows it at 24% full. The bottom set of infrared images here shows the same group of fixed roof tanks on 2 separate days. The upper left tank has a total capacity of 493,000 barrels, so it's a very large tank. The image on the left shows it at 53% full, while the image on the right shows it at 78% full. And so if a quality image cannot be obtained on any given flight for a tank, which does happen occasionally, we have to use the most recent measurement of the tank. And our customers can see which, if any, tanks are estimated for a given report in our tank level data, although this is a pretty rare occurrence. We usually get quality images of every tank, every flight. Let's now move on to the next slide and talk about our measurement roll-up. So after each tank has been measured and reviewed by multiple analysts, we roll up every tank measurement within a field to provide our customers with an accurate picture of total storage at the monitored field. So these total numbers are just collections of individual measurements rolled up. So in addition to this summary level information by owner that we give our customers through a variety of formats, this is our web dashboard that you're looking at on the slide, we also provide individual tank level data for every tank we measure, which is what Brian showed previously. And that allows our customers to see really the information in as granular of a level as they would like. So moving on to the next slide, we'll talk about our intelligence reports. So in addition to our regular storage measurements, which is what we've been talking about so far, we also provide our customers with information on the status of each tank and alert our customers when storage capacity becomes operational or goes into maintenance, is constructed, or is destroyed. So as capacity moves between those groups of statuses, we let our customers know and show them updates and, as soon as we find the information out. So I'll give you a description of these images here. The top left is a picture of a tank undergoing maintenance work. The 2 middle pictures are of tank construction. The bottom left image is of a tank actually being destroyed. So our customers would have received intelligence reports on all of these images and with detailed tank information included. So the bottom right image is also interesting. We carefully monitor and alert on any special events that might impact our storage fields. And so this is an example on the bottom right of an update we sent to our customers during the widespread forest fires that approached the Cushing terminal in August of 2012. So I will turn the presentation back over to Brian now for the next section.
Okay, let's take a look at kind of the results of our measurements and compare them to what we see in the EIA, because there are some differences. We're going to start kind of backwards. We're going to start with the monthly information, and I want to start with that because that is the one place where the data you receive from the EIA is actual measurement data. Once a month, they ask the operators of these facilities to go out and actually measure what inventory is in those tanks. When they do that, the measurements that EIA reports and what Genscape reports on their end-of-month flights have a correlation of over 98%. Now, this graph is showing several years' worth of data, but you'll notice that they're not exactly the same. They track almost identically, but they're not overlapping each other. That's because the EIA reports what they consider operational inventory. The hills on the bottom of the tank are not included. We don't take those hills out of our number. We know the total capacity of a tank. We know the percentage that is full, and that is the total number that we report. So we expect to have, on an outright basis, a little higher level of inventory reported. But the movements between EIA and the Genscape number is almost identical when measurements are taken by both people. Even if you look at the change from one month to the next, the Genscape and the EI data correlate by over 95%. So when the method's the same, the information is the same. The questions that have come up recently with us is that our weekly information has deviated some from the report that comes out on Wednesday with the EIA. And we believe the biggest reason for that difference is that you have estimates coming in from the operators to a EIA. So if we look at just the raw data, what EIA reports and what we report on a weekly basis, then there's only a 62% correlation. However, if you smooth out the estimates that are inherent in their survey over a 4-week average, then that correlation comes back to almost 92%. So as that survey has estimates in it above what the real number is some weeks and below, if you can smooth those out, our number tracks. So what we really believe and what we're trying to let you understand is when we both measure, we're coming up with exactly the same number. We measure every single time we do a report, and the variances come up because of the estimates that are inherent in any kind of survey. So we think the numbers that we are reporting to you are a more accurate number every week. And just to kind of look at the impact that this can have, if we just look at what's happened this last week, Genscape showed a change of about 600,000 barrels at Cushing as a build. We reported that early on Monday. If you looked at where the market was at the open on Monday, then the Brent spread was trading at about $7.70, a little more than that. If you looked at the opportunity to trade the spread between WTI and Brent, and you believed the Genscape number, then you had an opportunity to capture 40% more of the move in that spread between Monday and the settle on Wednesday than if you had waited and just tried to collect that move on Wednesday when the report from the EIA was available. Now, I'm not going to suggest to you that that spread moves exclusively because of the storage levels, but when you have a significant build in Cushing, it absolutely is a part of the reason why that spread moved out as strongly as it did this week. So let's take a little look beyond Cushing, because Cushing's not the whole picture either. Cushing has been a very important focus recently in the marketplace because of the constraints of getting crude out of the Midwest into some of the other refining complexes. And the constraints associated with Cushing have really depressed the price of WTI and the other grades that are trading out of Midwest. But it's not the whole picture, and it's not the whole picture that Genscape reports on. We also report on the Canadian crudes and the storage that is at Hardisty and Edmondson, including the cavern. We report on Patoka, which is an important storage and distribution field for several of the Midwest refiners, receiving crude from Capline in the south, directly over from Cushing, and also down from Canada. And then Midland Basin out in West Texas, water the storages there. So all of those come together to give you a much more complete picture of what the inventory situation of available crude oil for processing in the United States, especially in PADD 2 and PADD 3 are. Our Patoka report, it's fairly similar to our Cushing report, the difference being we only report this once a week, but we measure that exactly the same way. We report it by operator, and we report it to the tank level as well. So each week you can see not only what's going on at Cushing, but is Patoka building? If Patoka is building inventories starting to reach capacity, then that's going to back oil back up into Cushing again, affecting the TI price. Basin is the same as a report for Patoka. It comes out once a week. It shows all of the storage by operator and by tank level, and it actually shows the specific locations in Basin. So you can track what is available to move into Cushing and more recently what can move into the Houston refining complex. Midland Storage is also available once a week. So if that's the storage information, if that's all the inventory that's available, that's still not the complete story for the supply chain of crude oil into the refining complexes. In addition, we provide information on pipelines, and our MidCon pipeline report is probably the most significant of those that come out into the marketplace. And within that report, we report intelligence, what's going on with key pipelines, when are they ramping up, have they slowed down, are any of them shut down for repair, and each day on the daily report, you can see what the average daily flow of each of those pipelines into and out of Cushing is. Now, we do have a bias because we monitor about 90% of the inflow pipelines into Cushing and a little less than 80% of the outflow pipelines. But by watching those daily flows, it gives you some indication and some prediction of certainly the direction and the magnitude of what any kind of build or draw in Cushing should be. We also produce alerts so that when a pipeline changes, if a significant event happens, we see pumping stations going down, and we verify that data. We send an alert out to all of our customers who are taking that daily information, letting them know that the pipeline flow has changed and has changed significantly. When it comes back up, we alert on that as well. In addition, we monitor many refining complexes. They're the end user of all of this storage. So as you have refineries go down for maintenance, as you have events such as flaring that takes place and upsets, we alert to the marketplace on those as well. And market intelligence is provided on refining, pipelines, and as well as storage. In this particular situation, we have a tank that is a marathon-operated tank. It's a floating roof tank, and this is an example of what our maintenance update would be for an intelligence report, letting you know what storage is coming into usage, what storage is being set on the sidelines. It also includes new construction and destruction of storage capabilities. This particular case, you have a tank that has been under maintenance, and it has just gone into hydro testing. Our St. James Supply Hub, we're excited about this report. This is the newest report that we've started putting out. We monitor not only the storage in this report at the St. James facility, but we're also monitoring something that has become a key component into the crude supply chain, which is crude that's being transported by rail. So both Plains All-American and New Star both have rail terminals at St. James. We monitor the delivery of crude oil into St. James at those terminals, as well as what's going on with Capline and how much crude is coming out of St. James and headed north on Capline. So if you look, we have the operators, the number of barrels available, the change in storage. So this is our newest report for the storage levels at St. James. We have history on this going back well over a year. This is an example of our rail monitoring. So you can see what's coming into each of the facilities on a daily average flow, as well as our pipeline monitoring for Capline going out. And at Collierville, we split it, what's going up to Patoka and what's going to Memphis. So we believe we give you a very good picture, not only of the storage and an accurate measurement of storage, but of the complete supply chain picture that wraps around that. So I want to thank you for joining us today. We're interested in any questions that you might have, and I'm going to turn this back over to Molly now to ask any questions that we've received.
everyone. Will, I believe you've been monitoring the questions, so if you want to select a few that have come in from the audience, you can answer them yourself or pose them to Brian.
Sure. So I got a question would be good for Brian here. You measure Cushing, Patoka, West Texas, and St. James. Have you considered the Houston area or Gulf Coast storage at Superior?
Yeah, we are always looking for where can we expand our reporting, and we're interested in hearing from you, our customers. What information do you believe is most valuable going forward? The Houston complex actually creates a unique problem because so much of the storage is tied up with the refiners there. It's operational inventory. It's not something that goes up and down a lot. I'm not sure there's a great deal of value in trying to expand into that area. We have been asked about the storage facilities up around Superior and what's coming in from Canada. It's something that we're evaluating, and it may very well become available at some time. We are actually very actively monitoring what's going on with ECHO, both transportation in and out of it and the total storage that's going to be available. And I'm sure that it will be available sometime soon in one of our reports.
Okay, so we've got a question that I can take about the time of Friday measurements. So the Friday report, the measurement is taken typically as late in the day on Thursday as possible. And so our flight times are always given to our customers in the tank level data, so it can be looked up. But that's generally it's late in the day Thursday. We also have a question on the accuracy of individual tank measurements, and I can take that as well. So I would point to the monthly number as kind of any benchmark we have with our total storage numbers shows that our storage numbers are extremely accurate. So our comparison, for example, to the EIA monthly. And so you can kind of think that we know that if we are rolling all of those measurements up to get that accurate measurement, our tank level data must also be correct. In addition to that, we've had feedback from operators of tanks when we've published tank level readings for them that they have found them to be very accurate. So I'll give this question to Brian here. Can you provide a track record of you versus the EIA?
Yes, we can. I think we supplied some of that today in showing the month-over-month comparisons. And we do that ourselves on a regular basis. Every week we go back and we look at what we have reported versus what the EIA. That's really what that monthly slide and the 4-week moving average slide is all about. We track that on a regular basis. If you are one of our customers, you have access to very easily from our webpage download a year's worth of our data all the way down to the tank level or the operator level, whichever you choose. And everybody knows that the EIA data is public data. So you can actually do your own comparisons of those data anytime you want to, or we can provide some of that to you. And when we both measure, we're spot on. When they survey and we measure, there are some differences, and we think that those differences are inherent in a survey. I noticed that there was another question out here that I'm going to take. Well, where did it go to?
Well, while you're looking for that, Brian, there's a question here I can take. So how do you know the difference when a tank is hydro testing as opposed to when it actually has crude inside? And so that's kind of probably related to the intelligence report where we saw a tank was hydro testing. So first of all, we track all of the maintenance and construction process for every tank. So we have a good idea of when the tank is finishing up maintenance or its construction period and when we expect hydro testing to occur. So we can tell it's hydro testing and not filling with product because an external hose is hooked up into the tank, and that hose is then attached to a water source, which is often like a pump in a holding pond nearby the tank. And another good sign that a tank, a good sign that a tank is operational and not hydrotested anymore is when the mixers are added. So these are machines that are attached to the side of the tank that are used to keep the crude mixed and are added to a tank after construction or maintenance, after hydrotesting, and before the tank is filled with oil. So basically, to summarize, like, we know the operational profile of all of these tanks and watch them closely. So we're confident when we make those calls.
And the question I was looking for was about what is our quality control methods, and both for storage and for our pipeline flows, we look for publicly available data, the EIA data, the measurements at the end of the month, as well as on pipelines we look at FERC data and other places where reporting into government entities is required, and we go back and look at what we've reported versus what the public data is that is supposed to be as accurate as it can possibly be. We do that on an ongoing basis to continually refine our models and to make sure that the storage measurements we are taking tie out. So I hope that helps answer your question about what the method is. It's comparing our historical data and our report information to those public records that we're able to get. Will, do you have anything to add about quality control?
Yeah, I would say, and I think these questions are kind of like, how do you know that you can trust our measurements? And I think that you covered that piece. And I would also say that we have worked with tank owners in the past and compared our measurements to actual calculated tank volumes. And so we know for a fact that our measurement methodology is sound, if that's sort of what these questions are getting at. Yeah. Okay. Let's see.